Episode 26 of Politically Conscious returns today, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Public broadcasting defunded, diversity programs dismantled, federal support pulled from Harvard and the Smithsonian. A new executive order expands police powers, echoing the bold vision of Project 2025. Today we discuss Trump, Sesame Street, and racism. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist Montoya Smith as we return with episode 26 of Politically Conscious, our pop-up political show where we actually comment on political commentary around the media. So basically political clips, we play a lot of clips and we respond. And so I got my brother Emil Bryant, who's an expert political consultant and literally holds me down every week. And we're trying to get one of our other brothers on here pretty quickly. But if you will, Emil, go ahead and give him the longer introduction as we give our brother Leo a little time to get to the office and get in this thing. For anybody that was looking for our brother Shelly, just wanted to highlight this real quick. Shout out to our brother Shelly, had a family emergency, wasn't able to be on today. And so hopefully all is well with his family, just to highlight that as well. But yeah, tell him more of your background and before we get into today's show, because we've been brewing this one for a couple of weeks now, and typically we're just popping up with no thought process. But with this one, I really wanted to go deep. So yeah, give him some of your background, brother.
Sure. I am a military veteran, United States Air Force over 20 years, graduated from the Air Force Academy, and retired, started a business about now 9 years ago, 8.5 years ago, as a consultant. I worked for corporate America, Fortune 500s, and then I helped run some campaigns. The most prominent was a congressional campaign. It did not win, but I learned how to consult with political candidates. And the thing that I always tell any candidate who calls me and asks me for my advice or wants to work with me, tell the truth early, tell it all the time. Bad news does not get better with time. And in this environment, I'm learning that people are scared of the truth because it hurts too much for their future. But I always tell them, get your information in the mind of the listener. They'll respect you more for saying what's real than hiding it.
No, love it. Love the approach. I do think your approach is probably more of the old school approach, because I don't think in politics anybody actually tells the truth anymore. It's partly why we have this show, and our brother Leo Smith helps us keep it real. And thank you, brother, for being with us. Give a little bit of your background, and we're going to start playing these cuts and get you out of here, because I know you're saving us at the last minute. So thank you for shooting in here with the last minute call, if you will, brother. But thank you for being with us.
Well, my pleasure to be with both of you guys and jumping on off the road here. Look, these are important subjects because our government is changing at the speed of light right now.
Got a little sound issue again, just so you know.
Okay. Let me try.
Much clearer, like where you're at now. I don't want to make you sit up, but if you sit up, it sounds much better. Maybe
okay, good. I got you. So yeah, I mean, these are important times into dealing with these issues in a very real way. Government is shifting very quickly, and part of it is about what sort of information we're receiving and how that information is being controlled. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, according to your message to me, Montoya. I'm Leo Smith, Republican strategist who has been working on policies and candidates that will make democracy a better republic. And work with the RNC for a while, work with the Georgia GOP, and have done a lot of work in manifesting policy into the lives of Georgians and Americans.
No, sounds good. So let's get into these cuts. I'm gonna ask you to play with your mic settings, though. It's still a little, just play around with it so we can get a clearer one. And we obviously will have you do that once we come out of this cut. I'm gonna go ahead and play this first cut, because again, if you're just now listening or just now tuning in, we play cuts and we respond to them. And so here's the first cut I want to lead to. That's kind of not into our subject for the day, but I thought it was worthy of showing today. So let's start with this cut here.
All right, Mr. President Trump, I want to thank you for what you've done for me and my family. I just mentioned to Adam that I wanted you to know, everyone on your team, everyone that have supported this effort, that you know that we greatly appreciate it. Okay, I wanted you to be able to meditate on how you affected personally lives and the difference that you've made. I'm a 60-year-old grandfather and father. so I can't put words in how excited. Give all grace and honor to God. But he used instruments, and there have been a lot of people behind the scenes who have done a great work. So I wanted you to be able to hear that directly from me. And again, God bless you and your family.
Can't imagine what Tony Holden has went through. That brother looks amazing for 60, just to throw that out there. But hey, as we say, black don't crack. This is the politically conscious show, so we'll highlight that. But I just thought it was worthy to just highlight that cut. And partly because what we talk about constantly on this show is to be conscious and don't allow political rhetoric to get you so tunnel vision that you can't, in my opinion, applaud and see through the reality of what's happening in politics. So I just thought it was dope to highlight that brother had been brought home, and he personally wanted to thank the president. And so, Leo, any thoughts? I don't know if you had seen that this week, but just any thoughts to that again, and then we'll get into our subject matter after just sharing that cut.
Yeah, I just want to check to see if my audio is okay.
Perfect. That's perfect. What you're doing now is perfect.
Great. Well, look, I mean, this is the continued work, this issue of criminal justice reform, the issue of actually manifesting policy that will allow these men and women who have been incarcerated, and sometimes unjustly, sometimes with cause, but they're no longer a harm to society. And as you well know, I have to give props to people like Kim Kardashian, and then even Tim Scott made himself useful in the First Step Act, and just being part of that ecosystem where Trump has fully embraced this idea of being a hero to these folks. And of course, you can say it's self-serving, you can say whatever you want. What I'm mostly interested in is the fact that that brother and people like him, sisters, mothers, fathers, are coming back into society, being with their family and being able to contribute.
Yeah, I think this might be, if Emil, correct me, I think this might be the hostage that was brought from Kuwait. If that's how, did I get that right, or I'm wrong on who?
He was falsely accused.
Okay, this is okay. I got a mistake. So thank y'all for taking me out. I just want to make sure I was understanding. And I've been a big fan of the First Step Act, so I'm glad y'all did correct me. And I've advocated, because I just in mass incarceration is a soapbox of mine. So I don't care what side of the aisle gets it right, get it right. So I appreciate that. Go ahead, Emil. I'm sorry. Thank y'all for correcting me on what I thought that situation was. Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, no, it was weird because he was accused. The judge in Kuwait, he was accused in Kuwait. They searched his residence. He didn't find anything. And then at the trial, they threw out what was made up evidence, manufactured evidence against him, and he still got sentenced to 5 years in a Kuwaiti jail. So it was wild. The evidence against him was there was a alleged conversation between him and the investigator in English, but neither of the people who investigated him spoke English, and yet he still got it. So the Biden administration tried to free him. The Trump administration was able to do it. It was an immediate response, but it took some time. So mad respect to the team that got him out, because it was a long-standing effort. It wasn't like he was forgotten. He was remembered. It just took some time. And so respect to President Trump and his team on that particular issue, because he did bring him home.
Hey, and I think we should be able to do that and realize that politics involves working with both sides to pull off things that need to be done. And at the end of the day, we should all have the goal of, regardless of what political side you're on, of doing what's right for the American people. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Montoya, on your show, you, Emil, and I have talked about this idea of big stick politics. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people might not like the messiness that Trump is bringing to fore. But we all know that this planned strategic confusion where Trump operates in a way, whether it's domestically with the board of prisoners or whether it's internationally with a prisoner who might be held in a foreign nation, Trump does scare people. And we're scared here in America, many of us, and certainly internationally people are too. And you could argue, and he will argue, that's part of his effectiveness in dealing with hostages and bringing people back in a way that Biden wasn't as capable.
Hey, and that's a very fair thought. All right, let's play this next cut and get into our subject matter for today, at least begin that conversation.
The threat right now is they take $1 billion away from NPR, PBS over the next couple of years, correct?
Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR, PBS, and all of public media.
What does that look like?
It's not great. I think that Americans need to be aware that it is going to be harmful to the system, right? So a lot of us probably grew up on kids television, PBS Kids. It is a crown jewel of American public broadcasting programming. And whether you think about, your history with Mr. Rogers, whether you're thinking about Sesame Street, whether you're thinking about more contemporary programming, that is so important, and that is under threat. When you think about your local radio stations, those may not be able to provide the same sorts of services. And the first thing that's going to go, I have to tell you, is going to be local reporters' jobs. We have news deserts. 20% of Americans live in a place where they have no local news coverage other than public radio. What that means is that when we lose public funding, we are no longer going to be able to cover things like what matters in the State House. We're not going to be able to cover natural disasters. We're not going to be able to cover issues of, local politics, issues of what's happening in your local sports team. We know that the existence of local news, and public radio in particular, contributes to lower rates of polarization, higher rates of civic engagement, and higher rates of civic trust. This is foundational infrastructure for our country. Even when we disagree, this is the sort of thing that can start to heal some of those disagreements and bring us back together.
Emil, I'll let you respond. I think this has broad base of potentially, I should say, I think to be fair to it, and y'all can give me the details, but I think this potentially has some big issues for our country, and I think it's setting up some other things of where we're going to go later in the show. But go ahead, Emil.
So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been around for a little while. It was started by Congress. And so it was in 1967 that the first act was funded. It was passed. And the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which includes Public Broadcasting Service, PBS, and National Public Radio, among others. There's more than just those two, but those are the two that we all know very well. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has a mandate to serve the public. That is their job. And so one of the things that they did was they said, what are the needs in the community that commercial radio is not meeting? Now, for people who don't know, I'll just go back real quick. It'll only take me 10 seconds. The airwaves over the United States belong to the people of the United States. That is what is considered our property as citizens of the United States. So that is a resource that we lease to all the stations around the country. Before the advent of cable, companies had to lease airwaves in order to establish a station. So they had licenses. That's what the FCC was for, the Federal Communications Commission. So these licenses allowed those broadcasters to use those airwaves. There was a payback that we were supposed to get as the people. We were supposed to get a service. That service was the government got money. They actually paid money into the system. And then the service was like the news. And for a long time, the news was nonpartisan. It was for a long time was without commercials. And then as the airwaves got more and more commercial, there was a need to have the public's airwaves used for the public directly. Hence the creation of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And then they started doing their analysis and saying, what are the holes? And
so let me, if I can speed you up. Thank you for that vivid background. I think it's necessary to understand that context. Now, let me speed you up to the effect of this president saying, hey, over the next so many years, I want to look to defund it. What do you think the impact of that is currently? But we definitely appreciate that background.
For sure. And I'm sorry I had to kind of take that digression. But
no, you're good. No, it's good. I'm just getting you to it now. Now, you did a great background. Yeah, let me just push
Since its inception, it's been under attack from the conservative side, mostly the Republicans. They were always afraid that it was too liberal or it was too progressive or it served the wrong people or it made them look bad. There's a lot of reasons why they've hated it. But in the last 30 years, those attacks have accelerated. At first, it was like, okay, it's a common good. We can fund it. And then by the 90s, they felt it was a little.
I'm trying to get you to today. Yes.
Today, this is the culmination of all of those attacks. This is, I'm going to kill it. So what's the effect? You now have a hole in serving the public in news, in entertainment, and in educational programming. And that hole is going to make us all, which we have probably learned already, a little dumber.
Yeah, let me run it over to Leo real quick, and I'll just make a broad-based statement of I think some of the stuff that we keep hearing in the news about where our government is going, whether it's the term oligarchy, right? Where we talk about is Trump being a fascist, those terms, and we know some of those are political attacks, often over-exaggerated. But I am a little concerned, Leo, when we start messing with media and speech, and we're going to keep down that lane. But I am concerned, and even knowing the exaggerations are going to exist, and they're not as big as they really, as the exaggerations are, but I think I'm seeing enough evidence to be concerned. Your thoughts, Leo?
I'm going to do two things at once. I'm going to share a story real quick,
Okay.
Why NPR and public radio might be being attacked, but at the same time, I want to talk to you about the freedom of it with a real example that your own audience can engage with me on this, okay? I sat with a Grand Wizard of the KKK in Virginia and defended their right to put an adopt a Mao sign, the KKK, on a highway, a public highway, as their sense of community engagement, right? And so I had the ability, I was an NAACP president, and I said, look, if these people want to do that, they have a First Amendment right, a free speech right to do that. Now, is that sign violent? Does it impose violence? So now when I just said that to you as a conservative guy who's worked with Republicans with all the accoutrements about Republicans and racism, there are certainly some of your audience, Montoya, who are not going to be happy about me, who would be upset and say, this guy is a this guy is a that, and you need him off your show. There have been other things I've said. Well, that also happens on both sides when you're listening to public radio shows. So conservatives hear something they don't like, they want it out. This is my taxpayers' dollars paying for this idiot to say things like that. And at the same time, left-wing people say, this is my taxpayers' dollars paying for Leo Smith to say that he should allow the KKK to have freedom of speech. And so Americans have to understand what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Now, Trump is taking revenge. He really is. In 2023, and so I'm going to bring it home so y'all can go get involved. In 2023, the Georgia General Assembly looked down upon Georgia Public Broadcasting, a affiliate of NPR and public broadcasting. So what they did was they said, we don't like some of the shows you're doing. They beat up on right-leaning people too much. And this is doing, the spirit and time of all this unrest that we're having culturally. I was on a guy's show as a regular commentator. They actually canceled his show. And that was Bill Night's show, Political Rewind. I'm sure Montoya's heard of it, if not Emil. Okay. They had right and left people on there, but a few right-leaning people felt like they were being attacked when they were on there. So what you need to know as Georgians, as Americans, that public broadcasting's board is appointed by politicians. And so therefore they had that power to say, we're going to refuse funding to you from the State Digest if you don't get rid of that show. This is what Americans need to know. It is a public access availability for you that you can go into Georgia Public Broadcasting, find out who's on the board of directors. It won't be on the website because of this hostile environment that we have, but you can see when the meeting agendas are going to happen. The next meeting is May 28th. Hey, Americans. Hey, people who don't like racism and silencing of your voice, show up there and let them know that you demand courage.
Wow. Politically conscious. Again, our goal is to give you seeds, tools to think differently about politics and take action, because we keep highlighting the individual. We have more power than the actual Congress people, believe it or not, if we give them direction, which is what the call to action that Leo just gave you. Let's keep this conversation going, if you will. Here's another cut in another direction. Again, we're building this show up to have this dialogue completely.
This amendment simply says that the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement shall not detain or deport a United States citizen. If you vote no on this, you are supporting the federal government either detaining and or deporting American citizens. I don't understand how you'll be able to look yourself in the face knowing that you voted to allow our federal government to detain and deport United States citizens simply because you do not want to vote against something that Donald Trump may support? Do you have a thought of your own? Do you have a belief of your own? Or is everything literally just whatever Donald Trump tells you it should be? You are going to vote no on this. We know you're going to vote no. And I'm interested to see, if anybody asks you why you voted no on this, how you're going to spin it. You may say, oh, well, United States citizens aren't detained or deported. False. False. By ICE, that is.
On Thursday, ICE detained American citizens, a military veteran, and one of my colleagues and her son, who is 8 years old. Now, my colleague and her son are Black American citizens. They have Jamaican ancestry. They were detained for over 24 hours. That's how long it took us and lawyers to get them out of ICE detainment. And the son now has extensive trauma, and they are Black Americans. I'm not sitting this out. I just said in another video, I'm not sitting anything out because our community is going to need us. Black Americans were detained. That means they're not going after just people who are illegals, as you want to call them. They're going after whoever they can. And the 14th Amendment was an amendment that gave Black people birthright citizenship that were descendants of slaves. So if that is repealed and they go after one group, who do you think they're going after next? I'm not sitting anything out. Not when my community is going to need me. I'm not going to do it.
So the second cut is a lawyer talking about something that she had to deal with specifically. I haven't been able to research it in more detail, but I'll start with you, Leo, because when I saw it, it reminded of when you were fortunate enough to be on our show last week. And I remember you saying, well, this is, as a Black American, I don't think this will happen to us. I don't think one example proves you wrong per se, but we have to have the dialogue, because I always highlight the history of this country does not bode well anytime over policing becomes the norm. It doesn't bode well for our community. So I feel like I have a historical right to concern, and to a degree wanted to see what your thoughts were, because a week later we have this lawyer saying, hey, these Black Americans were at least detained by ICE. I haven't been able to research what has happened since that time.
Yeah, and I've never heard this story as well. I just Googled it. It's not even in the news really. So that's, I'm going to just leave that as that's a person's opinion. She provided no name. She provided no reports from any other news source. I mean, primary source or otherwise. Right. I'm not saying I don't trust her, but in this world, you have to trust and verify. And absolutely, as an attorney, she should have cited, where she got her source, where this information can be found, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm a little skeptical, to be quite honest.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Fair enough. What about the actual, and I'll go to Emil, the initial cut where you have obviously a Democratic congressman saying, hey, I know y'all are going to vote no. And they're just kind of walking through what the actual amendment says, and they're kind of using it against the fact that they're going to vote no on it. But obviously they're being literal, and you can speak on that as well. And I want to hear Emil's thoughts to that before we play another cut.
So this is an immigration bill that was being marked up. So the markup process just means the bill's going between the different committee members, that they're literally writing on the bill. It's called markup for that reason, to figure out what the bill should say before they pass it to the full House of Representatives for a final vote. The markup process is where you introduce amendments to the original bill. So the Democrats introduced several amendments to be very, very, very blunt. Do not include citizens in these roundups of undocumented immigrants. So the Republicans refused to allow that amendment. There is enough anecdotal data that amendment should have at least been considered. And there's more than enough anecdotal evidence from ICE. Like if you go to KFOR, there are 3 American citizens. They're using pseudonyms, but KFOR verified that they were citizens who had their home raided. They had their phones, laptops, and cash confiscated by ICE, even though they're citizens. They had a name on a warrant that was none of the people in that home. So now these people are sent outside in the weather. They don't have phones, laptops, or money, and they're American citizens. They're being victimized by ICE for something they didn't do and a status they don't have. That is a problem. So the Democrats introduced this amendment, and Leo talks about being very, very blunt in the warfare, the political warfare that we should be seeing. This was one of those moments where I'm actually impressed that the Democrats stood up and did something very firm, and they made the Republicans sit on their hands, and they gave the Democrats a chance to pontificate and proselytize and do all the things they should be doing every single day to keep this administration as close to accountable as possible. So that amendment did not pass. In fact, no Republicans voted for it, which, by the way it's put together, says it's like by ignorance. If I don't do something, what will happen? And the don't do something is, if we don't say don't deport citizens, there runs the possibility that ICE could, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, just make sure I'm using the right language, could deport citizens. And because we are already in this space where there's no due process or clear due process for every single person, there runs this risk that American citizens could be deported. Now, if you're a citizen, you can't be deported. Where are they going to send you? That's the question you should be asking. If you hear the word citizen deported, the question is, now a naturalized citizen can go back to the place from which they immigrated, but an American citizen, someone who's born here,
Okay.
there is no place they can go because
and that's where I was. And Emil,
citizen.
Now, yeah, let me real quick, Leo, because I love what he just broke down, which helps gives the clarity from what you said last show, right, to this very moment. And again, that's what we're here for. We're here to weed through the propaganda that you're getting every day. So Emil just broke down exactly what the amendment was, how it was used politically. And now I think I hear, Leo, I think this is where you're going. I'm just letting you know, I'm learning from both of you. I'm the moderator. Y'all the political experts. But I think I hear why you said what you said last time, Leo, because if, despite what it may appear or how it's being used, then as he meant, there's some anecdotal evidence. I think that leans into, unfortunately, if you do deport a lot of people, some mistakes will be made. If a mistake is made, obviously a political party is going to jump on that and highlight that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're hearing in the propaganda is actual factual. And I think we're clarifying that right now in this moment. Go ahead, Leo.
And indeed, and I commend Emil for making it clear, because see, when Americans say, when you asked me last week, I said Black Americans, right? Yep. Now, in the culture, we understand Black American does not mean necessarily a person who migrated here, became a naturalized citizen. We mean generally, when I say Black American, a lot of Black Americans mean a descendant of American slavery.
Absolutely.
And so for instance, I don't know that particular attorney, for instance, or any Democrat or anybody who stands up and starts to pontificate about American citizens being, so Emil made it clear, all citizens are not created equal. Now, the left and some folks who might be called woke, they don't like hearing that, right? All citizens are not equal. Naturalized citizens don't really have all the same defenses as you just put out that a native-born citizen would have. And folks, I'm sorry, but we've got to deal with what's real and true. And Emil, you did break that down really well. So we need to understand that when a Mauritanian is married to an American Black woman, okay, she might have been a descendant, but he isn't, and he gets deported. Saying that a citizen was deported doesn't tell the whole story.
Well, see, Leo, I agree. And this is the part that I think we have to be so careful about. Once you're naturalized, you are a citizen, period, dot. The only way that citizenship can be taken from you is through the due process. You violate the law, and And then as part of your punishment for having violated the law and have been convicted of a felony, you can have your naturalized citizenship revoked. At that point, you can then, because you're no longer a citizen, be deported. They have to go through those processes in order to make that happen.
And I hear you leaning into the processes, Emil. I hear you leaning into the process, but this to speak to our culture, politically conscious, that's our show. So to speak to our culture, what I'm also hearing is there's always this underlying issue when it comes to any immigration issues for Black Americans, as Leo clarified on the show in this very moment. There's always this conversation of, does it pertain to us? Do a lot of these immigration things pertain to us? And so if we're going to talk about the propaganda, the reality is the left kind of leans and plays into it and starts saying, oh, this is going to start happening to Black Americans. That's how it gets played out. But when I listen to the actual factual and what we're doing here, I think it is fair not to have the concern. And Miller, I expect you to, because I respect your leanings and I respect that you are a letter of the law. I'm not even trying to have a disagreement. I'm just separating the nuance. Yeah,
let me walk this out real quick though. Go ahead.
You have a right to your thought. I'm just walking through the cultural aspect of how, and letting our people know how the propaganda gets used. They can do what they want with that. Go ahead, Emil.
So some part of the propaganda is this birthright citizenship conversation, and it's a legitimate conversation, and people should have their eyes on this topic. If birthright citizenship is revoked, if the courts, and this is how it's supposed to happen, the courts have to decide through their interpretation of the 14th Amendment that birthright citizenship does not apply to anyone who's not born, and they'll figure out those conditions. The point I'm trying to make here is for the descendant of enslaved Africans. I am not a descendant of an institution. I'm a descendant of people, and they were enslaved Africans. As a descendant of enslaved Africans, my citizenship was posited on the 14th Amendment. Everybody who was here as enslaved was a citizen, and from that flows our citizenship. Many of us do not have records of our birth the way you would expect in many states. Some of us were born on farms. Some of us were born in homes. Some of us were born literally in barns.
You said it was going to be quick. I'm speeding you up now. We got to speed it up. Sorry. Go ahead.
And we may not all have proof of citizenship. That is the window through which a lot of these concerns can come to pass. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm saying that's where the propaganda is beginning to feel very close to home, because a lot of our elders and some of us
I got it. Yeah, I'm not have
all that documentation.
I hear you're going down to the specific. I don't think the propaganda leans into that at all. I'm just calling it what it is, in my opinion, Neil. I think it literally just pushes fear of this could happen to you, and they're playing around, to Leo's point, with the word citizen without giving the clarity. I think the propaganda misuses and doesn't highlight. I think you're able to do that because of how much you know history and how much you understand this. But for the average person, I think the propaganda is being used without them knowing any of what you just said. And I'm just calling it what it is. That's what we're here for. So that's my thoughts on it. And to Leo's point, like really as African Americans, as Black Americans, when people say, should we be concerned with that? In reality, it's probably not going to happen to us. And I'm conceding that after listening to all that. The reason I even played that cut by that young lady, that's why I put up this thing. She goes, one of our watchers says, facts, source up or shut up. That's the reality. I'm playing the cut so that we can break down the real from the fake. And Leo made a great point, even with that so-called lawyer making that situation, like we're challenging people, don't just accept the information you're seeing on the internet. So that was another example of that. So great job, Leo, of bringing that to the point and why we exist as a show. Let me go on to this next cut.
Where are all of those free speech people who grifted off of free speech and who won't say anything, and recognizing that this current administration is taking a turn that is quite dark, okay? It is not what we signed up for. We are supposed to be the people who defend speech. So why is it now I'm finding myself in agreement with Anna Kasparian and Cenk over at the Young Turks, who are calling out what is happening? and how suddenly there is this squeeze on speech only as it pertains to the special topic of Israel. Take a listen to what Anna had to say on the Young Turks.
David Friedman, who actually was Trump's ambassador to Israel in his first term, he doesn't just stop at progressives and their critique of Israel. He's also focusing on the right wing as well. And I suspect that this is waking the right wing up.
Yeah, this is not going to play well.
Because if you think that, free speech violations are only going to impact the left, you'd be mistaken. Take a look.
I condemn anti-Semitism on the right and on the left. I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, none of them are any good on the right. On the left, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it. There's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can deport them. We can put them in jail. We can make their lives miserable. We can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
Okay. Now understand what he considers anti-Semitism. And by the way, you're an American citizen. If you are spewing anti-Semitic garbage, you're actually free to do that as long as you don't act on it, right? Free speech is a thing. Hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. This guy thinks that simply criticizing how Israel is prosecuting the war is already anti-Semitic. It's already anti-Semitism. And he wants to throw you in prison for it.
Yeah.
In prison for it.
And by the way, that was an answer to a question about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. So we're not talking about student visas anymore.
Oh my God.
Now we're talking about core American podcasters, people in media on the right and the left. If you criticize Israel, he says, well, you have no heart and you have no mind. You have no heart because of course you should know when Israel slaughtered 15,000 children, it was the most moral thing to do. And if you dare disagree, we'll arrest you. And what did he say? Oh, we'll cut off your funding. By the way, he's like, it's anti-Semitic to say that the Jews would control speech in America. But if you dare cross Israel, we will cut off your funding, we will deport you, we will arrest you. But don't say it. If you say it, what I just said, I'm gonna call you an anti-Semite.
No, maybe I'll throw you in prison.
Okay, they're saying, well, we start with the left, but we're equal opportunity condemners.
Yeah.
So Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and everyone else, you start slightly criticizing Israel, we got a jail in Louisiana and then one in El Salvador that Israel can send you to via the US government.
It's insane, okay? It is insane. Time for Americans to wake up to what is happening, okay? Because our freedoms will be taken away very quickly. And yes, it is happening under this administration, okay? 1000% Trump is being surrounded by ultra-Zionists who are getting him to take stances that are running counter to freedom. And those of us that are calling it out, I don't care. I really don't care what you call me. I don't have to survive a Trump administration. My kids have to be able to grow up in a free country. I just can't. I will not tolerate it, whether it's happening on the left or the right.
So, Emil, I'll start with you, and I'll lead with the old Southern saying or country saying, when America catches a cold, we catch the flu. So again, we're starting with First Amendment rights. Clearly, that's their discussion. But I think I'll keep saying this. There is a history for me as an African American to be overly concerned when I see this situation doesn't right now, in this conversation doesn't seem to be directed to us. But I am always overly concerned when we start and know the history of the attack on freedom of speech. Your thoughts, Emil?
So there's a definition of anti-Semitism that they're using in the administration that's very narrow, and therefore that's where a lot of this comes from. You can look it up. I can't remember the name of it right now. I had to do some research a few weeks ago and I forgot to mark the page, but I'll find it again. But basically, the United States Congress has voted on this definition of anti-Semitism before, and they're using it again as a working definition. It's not the official definition, but it's a working definition. Why is this important? Because part of that definition is criticizing the state of Israel. So you can be called anti-Semitic if you say the policies of a government called Israel are now, you don't like them, you say something about that, that's considered anti-Semitism versus what we would have known it to be as a more personal kind of attack in the past. I say that because this administration has a list of words and people who have said those words that are not welcome. And that list is growing daily. And so there's a list of Americans who are either propagating those words, saying those words, or standing on policies that affirm those words. And they're saying, we're going to get you. This is a problem because we as African Americans, of course, our history with Jewish people is very twisted. I won't say it's bad or good or right or wrong, but it's got a lot of curves in it. And those curves include lots of Jewish people standing up for us when the time came and us standing up for them when the time came. That was something that was well known in the 60s and 70s. And now that potential may be an Achilles heel for us. Because, you know, the NAACP, the roots of it were funded by several Jewish members. And so you can go back in time and look at this conversation between Black and Jewish people in America and see where that anti-Semitism conversation could turn south quickly for Black people. And to me, it's a broad opportunity to squelch free speech in ways that we may not have seen since probably the late 60s.
Yeah, we have to be really careful as we deal with these issues. They're very nuanced. And as Emil was speaking, and not disagreeing with anything he said, I am reminded to say Jewish Americans fought for civil rights action here in America, because that is what's conflated, okay? There is Israel and Jews in Israel. They have their issue that is not an American domestic issue, except that there are Jews in America, Jewish Americans, who care about that issue so much, they want to make it American policy. It is not unlike us saying that we care about a country, us as descendants of the institution of American slavery, saying that we care about a country, provided that we know where we're from, what country in Africa. And we want to make America fight for that country because it is our inheritance.
Right.
Well, we got to be clear about that. And so therefore, that's a reason for a divide on this issue in itself, okay? And the HB 30 in Georgia is the anti-Semitism bill that we just went through 3 years of lobbying and advocacy and activism on. And it does, as Emil mentioned, have a definition of anti-Semitism that is a UN adaptation, widely used for the working, and includes, like, you know, discriminatory anti-Israel acts. Hello. I mean, so, hey, I am involved in helping to erect a soulful Shabbat very soon. I work for the National Coalition of Blacks and Jews.
Okay.
But that wasn't about Israel. My work was about America. So if we're getting to the point where American policy says that anything anti another government means that you can be shut down free speech wise, woo, what are we talking about here? So if I say something, if I say that, well, Joe Biden can't say anything about Africa that's negative, or an African country. Whoa, man, what kind of world are we trying to get to? So as a conservative, I don't believe Republicans truly will. I think this is messaging by the Trump administration that is horrible. And is part of this whole culture war mix up and shake up. But we have to be firm on this. And I stand with Candace and the Young Turks and all of those people that I just got introduced to.
No, absolutely. And what it shows to the power of the role that we have. I keep saying this consistently. Like, we're doing this show to not only raise your awareness, but hopefully in your awareness, once you know, maybe we act a little different and use that. And so what you just said, I didn't think about it till you just said it, Leo, but the beauty of we're watching what happens when the American people are challenged in a way that's inappropriate to what we say our deals are. And you see two people who would never be seen together, siding on anything together. You get Candace Owens and how you say Sink? How you say his name? Sink?
Jenk.
Yeah, Sink Jink. So I'm just highlighting. Yeah. So to your point, that's a beautiful thing to see, despite what we're saying here is the unfortunate undue influence that basically, if we to say this in a layman term, the undue influence of a lobbyist group on our country, a very wealthy lobbyist group. And so we see these things being played around with, but as American citizens, we're watching our media, which is their role, kind of inform us and stand up. So big up to Sync, big up to Candace, calling it for what it is. Go ahead, Emil, unless you want to say something.
Yeah, one of the things is, Jewish Americans have, they run the political spectrum too, right? So there's a lot of conversation within their community as to how important this definition of anti-Semitism is. There's a strong group of liberal Jewish people who are like, man, are you crazy? Don't do this. Right. You're making it worse for us in the near and long term, because people will resent the fact that this narrow definition becomes a source of great friction for their free speech. On the other side, they say, hey, we're never going to let anybody speak on us again, because we know that that's a slippery slope that gets Jewish people in trouble. So they're within the community, they're having this conversation, and it's being played out right in front of us on the national stage. So this conversation isn't simply, is the administration, to what Leo said earlier, is in the thrall of some people who are very far on the right side of this conversation. Mm-hmm. And maybe President Biden had people who are closer to the center. We haven't seen many politicians on the far left side of this where they're like, look, until they do something, we're okay with the words. That conversation is really tough, and I'm not saying I should have it, but I'm telling you, you're seeing it playing out right now in the national media.
Wow, that's powerful, brother. And they also have, if tell me if I'm wrong, but just based on what you just said, they literally have the example of what just happened with the woke movement over the last 2 years. Like the example of how far do they want to play it out, right? I'm just saying, like you said, if they're having that within the Jewish community saying, hey, are we sure we want to allow this to go? They actually have the example of what happened with woke. So some of the things that we're seeing deteriorate now with the DEI stuff being misused and misnomered, if you will, definitions change in order. They're saying, hey, they're able to go, hey, that might happen to us if we allow, to your point, Emil, this definition to be narrow. We may become to that, and now we lose what we actually want. And this cut right here speaks to some of what we're talking about. So let me play this next cut and see if we're aligned or, what we think about it. But I just think we had to,
Trump put up a wall against China, and then they went out and shot the American car companies. Ford was just downgraded today. I saw its stock, I think, is down to $7.50. Why is that? Because Ford did everything that Biden asked it to do, that a rational company would ask it to do, that we would want it to do. And then what does Donald Trump do? He comes in with his right-wing woke bullshit and says, we don't do EVs here. EVs are for girly men. We only do manly industries. Well, fuck that. Because look what happens now to Ford. So you say we want to bring this here. I don't want to have my kids screwing in parts into cars. I want them designing, investing in, and inventing the next generation of EVs. But let's go back to that ecosystem I talked about, Ezra. EVs, robots, autonomous cars, batteries, clean energy. If you say, oh, we're not to do the EV part. Before I came over here, I read Trump wants to reopen coal plants. And he loves drill, baby, drill. It doesn't make any sense. You're building a wall against China. Great. I'm all for it. But what are you doing behind the wall? So we catch up. You're taking your own companies out and shooting them in the back if they're not right-wing woke. What the Trump administration focus on. How many billions can we take away from American universities of their research funds to punish them for DEI strategies? Now, I'm here not to advocate DEI, but if I had a limited time in the world right now, I sure wouldn't be focused on that. I'd be focused on doubling down on the research capacity of these universities. I'd be doubling down on NIH. What are they doing? They're cutting the budgets of our Crown Gem research facilities. So it's all just bullshit. They're not serious people. They're clowns.
It's Leo's turn, but I'm going to throw it to you, Emil, because you've always highlighted the history of understanding technology and how our country kind of kept its education to the forefront by chasing excellence and pushing our public education when we went to the moon. So I want to throw this one back to you, but I want to highlight a couple of things, which again is why we had this conversation. So whether you're for or against the administration, the different policies, there are small policies that we've mentioned a few on this show that don't make the bigger headlines, but again, are concerning. And I want to connect it to why I even use the term quote unquote racism as a part of this conversation, because we haven't said that directly up to this point. So you see what that guy is saying. It's not about whether I agree or disagree with him. Clearly he's against Trump, if you will. And so definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. But as I'm thinking about this, here are some things that have happened over the course of us having this show over the last few months. Trump has officially made English the official language of America, which, in my opinion, just a quick opinion, makes no sense in the American experience as the melting pot country of the world. Most countries are more homogeneous. There are some that are mixed up just as much as us, but we are really the original experimentation for all the historical reasons that we know. So that makes no sense, and it's a small thing that didn't make the headlines. We've already talked about the risk of the federal funding from Harvard and the risk of what that means for example, our politically conscious prisoners in the past. What happened, I want to highlight this because one thing I think that we miss in current times is that during the civil rights movement, our ancestors got us to the space where we don't have to worry about being politically conscious prisoners in 2025. We don't connect the dots directly and respect what they actually guide us. And so sometimes we hang on to and say, like we just talked about previously, we're at risk for these certain things without realizing what our ancestors actually earned for us. So I like to always give that clarity and say they've got us past that step. But again, these things are all small, minor things, and what I would consider an erosion of things that are concerning for African Americans, to include that cut we played a few weeks ago about no longer recruiting Black engineers for the military at that specific conference. Those small things, in my opinion, should be and have to be concerning for us as African Americans. And it happens, in my opinion, because we don't misunderstand the misuse of this language. And as that guy did say, here's what I do agree with him. They're focused on this woke stuff more so than the policies that could be most important to us and benefit our entire country. And most of that win is in the diversity. And right now the language is pushing us away from diversity. But our country wins when we are diverse. I got on my soapbox. I know I'm supposed to be the moderator here, but I'll throw it over to you, Emil.
So this is it is super important that we understand that the EV battery he's talking about is sort of the wedge of a larger issue. For instance, China just started a molten salt nuclear reactor. Why is that important? It burns nuclear waste. So you can now generate power, and China is ahead of the United States in the most advanced form of a nuclear reactor, which means all the stuff that needs power, they're figuring out how to do it cleanly, cheaply, and quickly. That's something that was invented in the 1950s in the United States. Our country invented a technology, left it open source, and then the Chinese said, oh, that's great. That's great technology. We'll grab it 70 years later and build on it. That's the America that we should be trying to build up. You can't go backwards to coal when you invented something in the 1950s that China says will take it to its future. That's crazy to me. So but
they stole the technology, Emil. I mean, meaning, so they don't share with us like we shared with them. You just described how we shared with them, but they don't share with us. And so let's box this EV and this technology issue, because the competitiveness of America has within it a rule to allow its people to be prosperous and free. Okay? China doesn't have that policy. It's an unfair playing ground. And so we have to look at this thing in a very boxed way in this case, because I think that Friedman's wrong on this, and that we need to make sure that we have a chance to catch up and go forward in having these kind of innovations reborn in America. I mean, you got Derek Automotive, which happens to be a Black-owned EV manufacturing company, opening a showroom right here in Atlantic Station. Okay? Derek Automotive, look it up. So people like that American manufacturer is going to benefit once this stuff sets in, as far as reset on making sure American technologies and investment in technologies is happening in America, so more American companies can grow and prosper.
I love it. And this is, to me, I get excited about this, Montoya, because we have a chance with the minds that we have amassed in this nation, with the institutions that we have to shape those minds. We have the ability to leapfrog generations of technology right now. Even with all of the things that have happened in the last 30 years to education, we still have that. We still are the beacon for people who want to come. I don't know about the last 6 months, but we're still the beacon for people who want to come and be on the leading edge of manufacturing and technology. So what we need to do is, instead of saying, let's look back at coal, we're not going to fire a coal plant. That's crazy. What we need to do is say, how do we speed some of this technology to market? How do we speed some of the technology to improve environment? I'm a big fan of nuclear power, not because I love nuclear waste, but because it has the potential, when done properly, to clean up the environments that we're most likely the victim of in the Black community. So we have some chances here to really see ourselves as a nation go forward, but we can't do it if you have people at the top saying, let's go backwards, let's look backwards, let's drill. The American economy, let me just go back to the 1970s real quick and I'm done. Jimmy Carter, solar panels,
can you hear me?
The White House.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, got you. I want to get just a piece of clarity. We only got 5 more minutes. I got to get Leo out of here because he came in and saved the day for us. So I don't want to keep him. Just for the clarity purpose, I hear what you're saying, Emil. I just want to understand what you were talking about, Leo, and maybe what maybe we should be doing. Not so much Trump himself, but as a country. Help me understand the go between what both of you are saying. I want to understand it because one of our watchers said something to the effect of, I had it up here. Give me 1 second. He said that they didn't steal the technology. It was open source. I think that's what you had said, Emil. But I do want to understand if we should be doing what Emil's saying, maybe how should we be doing it? And is the current administration doing it in that manner? I don't know that I understand that. So give me a thought on that, Leo, just so I understand this.
No. Anybody who thinks that China doesn't steal technology, I'm sorry, I don't know what reality you're living in.
No, I get that part.
So let me just be clear on that, okay? So there is no way. That's sort of like saying, white cultures don't co-op American jazz or R&B. I mean, and do they share back with us in the way that we shared freely with them? Or they take, so come on.
You just give us clarity on that.
Let me just say on the coal issue, right?
Okay.
When somebody steals when you no longer have control of your energy source, electricity, nuclear, whatever it might be, or the technology to create it, and then you end up, because of the cost of energy going up, you have to go back and use firewood to warm your house. That's just practical. So, Emil, going back to use coal is in part, as his proposal, is because people are complaining about the price of gas and the price of heating their homes and da-da-da-da-da. So going back in, they're complaining about not having jobs and prosperity. So all those poor coal farmers in West Virginia would say, bring it on.
I love the thought that is true, but everybody's converted over to natural gas. It's cheaper and it's cleaner and it's going to be less environmentally impactful. And quite frankly, America needs to graduate. It started the graduation process. It's going to be rocky. Anybody who studies energy understands that. It's going to be a rocky transition from dirty energy to cleaner energy. It's going to take 30 years to do that.
Let me make a quick conclusion so I can get two final thoughts from both of you on this next cut. Again, just to kind of bring everything all together. I love what y'all are talking about, but to me, that's robust political conversation, and we'll figure it out hopefully through our governmental process and those who are lobbying. Like Leo saying, the people that are in certain areas, they would love for that to happen. And so there may not be necessarily a right or wrong, not that it needs to be. That's just something that we'll have to have a conversation. But I love the fact that we're not, again, our purpose here is don't just be pushed, one way or the other on it's right or wrong. Like that's something that we have to continue to challenge ourselves with all of the propaganda. Here's something that I played before, Emil, and I think it applies in my opinion, because again, some of these specific things, in my opinion, are that are happening are an erosion of stuff that we've already gotten from the civil rights movement that was beneficial to all Americans. But I feel like, as that guy did say, the wokeness of the right, I never heard it said that way, but I'll use it here just because it makes sense. It's pushing to erode things that doesn't help us move forward. And again, I'm not trying to be on a side. I'm speaking to the realities of why we saw a Candace Owens and I can't say his name, come together. So again, we have to pay attention as citizens. What are y'all thoughts on this? I'll start with you, Leo, and get you out. You can leave and get out of here because I know you got to go. And then Emil, you can give me a final thought and we'll end the show.
Donald J. Trump has certainly set a stage by which the unfulfilled promises of this country, the undealt with anti-blackness and other types of racism and bigotry have not been dealt with sufficiently. And so it bubbles up to the top when you have someone like him that spreads that kind of stuff. And no one should be surprised. But I think when people lay this at the feet of Nazi Germany, oh, no, wait a minute. No, this is just as American as apple pie. And also when they do that, you diminish what happened to millions of people in Nazi Germany, and more importantly, you diminish the black liberation struggle right here on this soil, where a type of fascism, apartheid type activity, chattel slavery itself that deprived generations of black people from living out their greatest greatness, from rapes to lynchings to generational chattel, you diminish that and you say, this is not us. No, it is us, and we need to deal with it and not push it off on some other nation.
Hey, forgive me. I had that sister's name when we played it a few weeks ago. I don't have her name right here. Just to be
Nina Turner.
Nina Turner.
Okay, thank
Nina
y'all. Yeah. People, please. I think it's believe it or not, a nice wrap up from this standpoint. I just love how she points out it's lazy to even, in my opinion, Trump is Hitler. She's how lazy that is and how unfair it is to the actual ancestors of ours that got us to where we are. So I love how she points that out. And I think it's applicable to this conversation because I feel like some of those very civil rights are being attacked underneath all of this, in my personal opinion. But Leo, any thoughts to what she said, how you feel about what she said? You can agree, you can disagree, but I want to get a final thought from you and get you out of here. Thank you for filling in at the last minute for us today.
As a Republican or conservative strategist, I will say that the Democrats have been woeful in listening to the brilliance of Nina Turner. That sister is smart. She's often on point, and they did not embrace her in her intelligence and her honesty about a lot of these issues. Because the issue of promissory note is spoken by Martin Luther King and the I Have a Dream speech, this idea, it's not just about commerce or whether or not we are at the tables of money changing, right? It's about the Constitution he was speaking of. And metaphorically, people have used that and sort of extrapolated about what America owes anybody. Well, the first thing America owes is its own people. And that is why, and the documents, the Constitution describes that. And so we are at this place where it is right to speak constitutionally for Americans and what our rights are and what's promised to us according to what those original authors created, and the continual authoring of it by civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King, who says America can be more true to those words in that document. Thank you, Nina.
Good stuff. Emil, give me a final thought and we'll close out.
Nina was on point and I appreciate it. So I tried not to do too much of my own opinion, but here's my opinion. If America is going to move into 2020, into the 2030s, it can't keep going back to the 1950s. We're going to have to graduate at some point into a mature nation. And the only way to do that is to take the Band-Aid off, look at the ugly, and deal with it. And she's saying that up front. Nazi Germany learned a lot of its tricks from us. Apartheid South Africa learned a lot of its tricks from us. So we are not clean. And until we get clean, until we deal with the original sin of enslaving Africans and stealing Native American land, if we don't get that right, then we'll have another nation where half the nation tolerates Jim Crow and the other half of the nation pretends like it isn't in Jim Crow. Yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have to figure it out. And she called us to the carpet and said it with great eloquence. We need to stare in the mirror and deal.
And I'll keep highlighting what we're witnessing is a last-ditch fight to go to what you just suggested, Emil. I don't imagine that our melting pot, as it becomes more diverse, will ever go back to it. But the fight is being had. We're seeing little small things being eroded, taking away the African-American history. What we really want to do, a museum up in Washington, if you will, if that's supposedly on the table. I don't know if they're going to do it. But I'm just highlighting that what she's saying and what we're saying is the honest dialogue is what will save us. But the honest dialogue, again, from an immature standpoint, sometimes is we want to just highlight it as all that history is all bad. Doing that doesn't move us forward either. So it cannot be emotional on either side of it, is what I would suggest. We have to have honest dialogues, but in those honest dialogues, we made progress. So expecting and recognizing that progress, saying despite this, we've done that, is the proper way to have that conversation. Right now, everybody gets leaned into, well, let's not even look at it. Let's not even look at the history. And then those of us who are harmed and had that American experience, we want to lean on to just the bad of it. So we're both taking the wrong approach to moving us forward to where we're inevitably going to get to simply by the demographics that we're headed in. But it won't be an easy fight, because those who've been in power for the longest naturally are going to hang on it, and they're going to start with verbiage and ideology the way it always starts. That's my conclusion. Thank y'all for a great show. See y'all when we pop up next week. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Subscribe to the show if you've been watching. Please share this episode with others as well. Wow.